As a kid, I dreamed of the Lamborghini Countach. I had posters, toy cars, but never a model. Now that I'm an adult, I can't afford a Lambo, but I can build one as a model. Also, I can customize the look of the Countach as I see fit. I'm sorry, Bertone, but I've got some changes. Now, I always thought the taillights in the Countach were wrong. Way wrong. The Revell kit faithfully reproduces the stock taillights, so I used that part as a template for my taillights. To start, I held the original part to a piece of flat styrene and traced the outside. I then cut it out with my X-Acto. Then I added a strip of styrene to the front and the back. It's thin, but just the right length to add some rigidity and design appeal. Next, I salvaged taillights from my '59 El Camino build. They were already in red, but they had no backing, so I filled them with canopy glue from Evergreen. Finally, I painted a silver base on the tail lenses. When they dried, I laid down a couple of coats of Tamiya Clear Red to get a reflector-like appearance. Here's a test fit with some color. Moving on, I really wanted to update the look of this car by adding vents and screens to the engine cover. First, I used my pin vise to drill several holes so I could easily cut the panels out with an X-Acto. I used the underside of the engine cover as a guide. With all the panels cut, I did a test fit. As a side note, you can see how I slid the rear wing mounts back and filled the holes with thick CA glue. Moving the rear wing back makes the car look even faster, in my opinion. Next, I wanted to add the screens to the panels. I did not want to cut out 5 screens, it would drive me nuts. So I made one large screen, kind of like a sandwich. Here is where I discovered my second issue with the kit. If you look close, the engine cover is actually ajar. The motor is just too tall. Now this is without my screens installed, which will make the issue even worse. I'll have to lower the engine by channeling where it is attached to the chassis. Next, I moved to the front of the car, and I put a lot of time here. So much so, I should have taken more pictures of the process, but here's what I have. I hate this DOT bumper crap on the front of the car. It has to go. That's more like it. Smooth, aerodynamic. Now we need to add some ducts and maybe some design elements. This is with the buckets I cut out of the original taillight part. I took 2 from each side. Unfortunately, I only have Tester's gray tube putty. I hate this stuff. It dries as soon as it leaves the tube, and you have to cap the tube, otherwise it'll just keep flowing. Before I used the putty, I glued a thin strip of styrene into the ground effects to smooth out the area. I then applied the putty and started sanding. Here you can see the gap still left because the primer made it easier for me to see. Notice the S logo I cut off of the rear taillight piece. I then added what I call tusks to the front fenders. These are aerodynamic spoilers that are on newer race cars because they add downforce. Since the massive rear wing on the real Countach creates a lot of downforce for the rear end, a balanced car will need it for the front end as well. To balance the downforce at the time, they just added this ugly bar to the front of the car. Then they added some fog lights and called it a win. I think this looks terrible. I made a sketch of what I wanted the tusks to look like. Then I cut the design out of styrene and shaped them with sandpaper until I was happy with them. I feel the fender spoilers are more natural to the car, and they look like tusks from a wild boar. I also added a small spoiler to the boot lid to balance out the aerodynamics. Oh yeah, it's coming along now. Here's the first issue with the kit. Since reading the instructions, I knew this area was going to be a problem. I want the bottom of the chassis to fit the shell of the body and not have a gap, just like the real car. Revell molded the lower part of the rear bumper to the engine cradle. So if I painted the body, then assembled the car like a normal model, I would have an ugly gap. It was at this point I chose to paint the model like a real car. I would put together the interior, engine, glass, and anything else that would go inside the body. The interior was one of the easier places of the model. I did buy this kit used, so I was missing the steering wheel among a couple of other things. So I scavenged the steering wheel from another model kit, and it's funny how they're the same scale, but this steering wheel was huge! Nothing I can do about that, and the windows are rolled up, so I decided it's not a big deal. I used silver paint on the gauges, and then I flooded the gauges with some thinned out black to show up some detail. And then I used silver paint on the surfaces where your hands would be or where the shift gate is. Finally, I added an extra piece to the dashboard to give the car a little bit of a tech look. It's actually a smoke grenade canister from an M1 Abrams kit I had laying around that I wasn't going to use. I took this moment to wire up the spark plugs. I wanted to do something special for the exhaust, so I decided to ditch the pipes that came in the Revell kit and use my own with styrene rods. They're a little bigger than what comes in the kit, but it's a Lambo. It's supposed to be audacious and gaudy. I cut the tip of one pipe at about 45 degrees. I was guessing. And then I held the other 3 pipes to that one and matched the angle, so that's why they all look kind of uniform. Close enough for me. Next, I painted the underside of the body black. I feel this would make the finishing steps easier, but I had to scrape paint off where the glue was supposed to go. Then I put the model together and did the body work to address those gaps. Before primer, I used Post-its and clear tape to mask the underside of the car. After I applied primer, I realized a tester's gray putty had let me down again by not filling the gaps all the way. It must shrink when it dries. Even the front ground effects were not good, so I sanded the areas with gaps and I used thin CA glue with an accelerator to fill in those spaces. I then re-sanded these areas and went back to the paint booth. I used tallow green art paint thinned with a custom brew thinner. No gap on the rear bumper now. I was unhappy with the visible glue on the front windshield. I did use canopy glue and it does dry clear, but it's thick and you can still see it. So to cover it up, I masked off some trim and painted it black. Whenever I build a model, I try to do something different with my process. I find it keeps the build interesting and it challenges me to do better. Here we have my alternative to Pledge Future. All kinds of channels on YouTube show how to use the stuff and add a protective, shiny, clear coat to your model. Well, I can't find the Pledge Future. I can't find it anywhere. So I have to use this Quick Shine floor polish. Quick Shine asks for 45 minutes of drying time between the coats. I can't let it sit in the airbrush for that long. And I don't want to clean my airbrush 6 times. That's crazy. So I decided to brush it on. That's crazy too, but it does work. This is one coat. This is 2 coats. The more coats you apply, the more gloss you will get. Just be patient. This is what 6 coats of finish looks like. I used my wife's Cricut cutter to make the logo. I also scavenged tires and rims from another kit, as the ones included with the Revell are reminiscent of pizza pans. I now display the Countach with my Samurai. It looks good to me. Well, thank you for watching. Do you have any recommendations or thoughts on this build or on my process? Type it out below and let me know. Don't forget to subscribe, please.